Hi everyone, it's Nichol Spohr here today for Waffle Flower, and I'm sharing a card featuring some new products from the July 2019 release. We've got this beautiful cloudscape panel in the background that can be used in so many different ways, and then I'm using the Bonjour stamps and coordinating dies to help build my scene. I first die cut the cloudscape panel die from smooth white cardstock. Then I'm going to take the insert pieces, the inlay pieces, and ink them up with distress inks, starting with my sidewalk for the bottom part of the card, which I'm inking with Hickory Smoke distress ink and an ink blending tool. I'm using a fairly heavy hand to really get that ink on there. Then the cloudscape in the background, I envisioned it more as like some trees in the background and then the clouds even further back out. This is going to allow me to build some things in the background of my card, including the Eiffel Tower, so that it can appear that that's off in the distance where the little bistro or little cafe or flower shop, whatever you want to envision the little building, is kind of back behind the girls, and the girls are in the foreground of this design. These are so much fun and I absolutely love the images. So 2 layers of the inlay are going to be inked with peeled paint distress ink, and again going to use a pretty heavy hand for the greenery. I've also gone with what I call a little bit more of a muted color palette today rather than a bright color palette. So instead of maybe your bright primary colors, we're going to have a little bit more of a muted color with olive greens and like deep burgundy reds, denim colors, kind of a peacock blue color, things like that. I'm just removing each layer of the inlay one at a time to ink them up so that I don't accidentally color them out of order. This is especially important if you're not going to be using them all for the same thing. So since I'm using 2 of these inlay borders for trees off in the background or greenery of some sort, I'm going to do those first, and then I will do the clouds at the very end. I also want to clean my glass work surface in between changing colors so I don't accidentally transfer the green into the blue that I'm adding for the clouds. For the clouds, I do want it to have that bluish sky tint to it, but I don't want these to be as heavily inked as the other 3 layers that I've just done. So I'm going to start off on my glass mat and gently move my ink blending tool into the cardstock to add that blue edge. To keep the color palette similar, I went with Mermaid Lagoon, as it's a little bit deeper blue color, but still has enough of that aqua-ish to it that I think it works really well for this particular scene today. So you can see I didn't pull the blue all the way down to the bottom. I tried to concentrate it along that top edge. We're going to do that for the remaining 2 layers before we take our images from the Bonjour Stamp Set and stamp them on some Bristol Smooth cardstock using the Ink on 3 Fade Out No Line Coloring ink. I'm going to stamp these up as many times as possible to get a really good outline and make sure I have a very good impression to work with. This ink will fade over time, and it's perfect for no line coloring. If you've caught any of my other videos with no line coloring and Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, you will know that I use this ink almost exclusively anymore for this technique. Plus, the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers are my favorite for no line coloring. The Bristol Smooth cardstock makes all the difference in the world when using these particular markers. I always start with the darker color that I'm going to use and then blend it out with my lighter marker. There's also a blender pen or blender marker that you can use to lighten things or blend even more. I'll use that in a couple places on this card, but for the most part I stick to a couple of colors. I'm using beige and light beige for the skin on the girl carrying a backpack. For her shorts, I wanted them to appear to be denim. I'm going to use deep blue and blue-gray for those. You can see I kind of trace out the shape with the darker color of marker and then blend out with the lighter marker, cleaning the tip of my marker often, the lighter marker often, so that I don't pull too much of that dark color out into the rest of the design so it all appears to be one color. I still want to have that great shading. For the stripes on her t-shirt, I am going to first go in with deep red and pale rose. And then for the alternating stripes, I want them to appear almost to be white, but I'm going to add a little color to those with the light gray marker. And I'll go back to that in a minute. We're going to go ahead and do her hat and also her hair with mid brown and oatmeal. This is a different color combination than I'll be using for other brown areas on the card. And that was on purpose because I want there to be lots of variety here. Again, I traced her hair and her little braids with the darker marker, the mid brown, and then blended out with my oatmeal marker. Here are those stripes on her shirt that I'm just taking my light gray marker and adding a touch of color to. I'm not going to use the dark gray because that's going to make them way, way, way too dark. I just want a hint of color for shading. For her backpack, we are going to use the blue-gray marker and the blender. So we used blue-gray in her shorts, and I want her backpack to be kind of in similar colors, but not the same color. A great way to achieve this is to use that blender pen for a little variety. For her sneakers, I'm going to go back to deep red and pale rose, as well as gray and the gray tint. The gray is going to add that detail of the laces and things in. I'm using it very sparingly. And then I'm just gently blending it out just a tiny bit with gray tint. For the building, I'm going to use brown and light brown. This will also be the color combination I used for the hair on the other girl here in a little bit. We won't get to her for just a bit yet, but this is a great color combination I kind of think for a redhead, and I will often use this for red hair. I'm tracing around the building with my brown marker first, and then I'll blend out with light brown. This is probably the biggest surface area that I'm coloring on the whole card, so I want to get this nice and as even as possible. Next, we're going to color in some of the greenery on the roof of the little, what I'm kind of considering a flower shop. I'm using different color combinations with olive green, also I believe mid green, and also ochre. I'm going to outline in my darker color for some of the leaves and then blend out with my lighter color. I'll use different color combinations of these three colors throughout any greenery on the design, pulling in the blender pen for some of that. For the flowers that are kind of rose-like looking at the top of this design, I am going to use a couple different colors of red than I used for the outfit with geranium red and tea rose. This gives a little bit brighter rose-like look because I didn't want to be using the same colors I used for the outfit. For the roof, I'm going to go with gray, and I'm going to outline the darling scallops here with my gray marker and blend out with the gray tint. That'll give a lot of detail to the cute roof. We're going to just gently pull that color down, not coming quite all the way. I'm going row by row, And then I will even take my blender and pull the color the rest of the way down. I'm cleaning the tip often to get rid of any gray that might be on that marker. There's a couple more areas that I want to add gray to, and I'm going to use the same gray and gray tint for these as well. I'm going to go around the top part where there's a big area of greenery at the top of the little flower shop with my mid-green marker, and then blend out with the blender pen. That's going to give me that lighter shade of green. So even though I'm using the mid-green and some of the other greenery on the design, it definitely gives a different look by using a blender with one of those colors. Then I'm using bright yellow and pale yellow for the remaining flowers for a fun pop of color. The flowers are a great way to incorporate some brighter color into the design, as well as adding pops of color here and there. For the door on the flower shop, I'm going to use mid-brown and oatmeal. Outlining the door with my mid-brown color and also the window casing. And then blending out with my oatmeal marker. There is a doorknob that I'll go back in with gray and color that in so it stands out. For the windows, I want them to appear to kind of have a glare to them. I'm going to go in with haze blue and just draw some little lines through the glass. I'm not actually coloring so much as just drawing in little lines with the tip of the marker. We'll finish coloring any additional little areas on this shop image before moving on to our next image to color. I tend to like to go image by image most of the time. I'm outlining the lantern with gray, blending out with gray tint, and even adding a little pale yellow inside that to appear to be a lighted lantern. We'll move on to the other girl now, again using beige and light beige for the skin. I am working fairly quickly and coloring all of these in one sitting since I stamped them all with that fade out ink. Again, brown and light brown for the hair gives it that reddish tint color to it, which I think is really fun. Pale pink was used for the cheeks on both girls. Her boots are colored in gray and gray tint. And then we're going to implement a couple of different colors of blue for her outfit. I colored her hat and her skirt with peacock blue and Persian green. Gives it a little bit more of an aqua tint, but still in that muted color palette. We're going to add stripes to her top, again using deep red and pale rose, but this time instead of doing a red and white striped top, we're going to do a red and aqua and blue stripe. So next we'll use our deep blue and blue gray, and then we'll go with our peacock blue and Persian green. We're going to alternate those stripes for her little matching sweater. It's about this time I noticed I missed her other hand, so I went back in with beige and light beige to color that in before finishing coloring the stripes on her sweater. For the paper bag she's carrying, I first started with beige and decided I probably better go darker because I want to use my beige and light beige for the baguette in her paper sack. I'm going to use mid brown and oatmeal for her sack and beige and light beige for the baguette. Even a little blender kind of keeps that a little bit on the lighter side. For the Eiffel Tower, since this is mostly an outline image, I am going to go in and trace this with my gray marker. You could stamp this separately with a gray ink or a black ink if you wanted to. I wanted it to appear to kind of have the same loose, more watercolored look that zigs give, even though we aren't actually adding water to this. And so I went ahead and stamped it with the same ink that I stamped everything else, and I simply traced it with my markers. I added a little gray tint here and there so that it really works with the rest of the design. The flowers for the larger of the two flower pots are going to be colored with geranium red and tea rose. This is the same color combination that we used for the roses on top of the flower shop. I will color all of these the same color. I originally thought maybe I might go in and do multiple colors, but I really thought it was more effective doing them all the same color. The leaves are olive green and mid green, and then the flower pot itself is beige and light beige. The remaining flower pot I'm going to color with peacock blue and Persian green. Then the flowers in this are going to be yellow with bright yellow and pale yellow, and the stems are going to be colored with olive green and mid green. Once I have my images completely colored, I'm going to take the coordinating Bonjour dies and die cut these images. I love that Waffle Flower doesn't tab their dies, so they're already detabbed and ready to die cut immediately. I am going to go back in with a black glaze pen and a black detail pen and add detail to the faces on both girls so that they really stand out. We're going to grab our Cloudscape panel background, a card base, and our images and start putting it all together. I'm going to take some 1/8 inch double-sided tape and go around the border or the outline of our Cloudscape panel to attach this to our design first. Then I'm going to put adhesive on the inside of these areas and inlay the clouds, the trees, and the sidewalk. I didn't put adhesive behind that little white border on the sidewalk to make it easy to tuck the little building underneath. The building is going to be attached directly to the background, as is one of the potted florals arrangements and the Eiffel Tower. I'm going to carefully lift up one of the tree backgrounds, with my Spellbinders tool-in-one and tuck that Eiffel Tower behind. And then I'm going to kind of position everything, making sure I'm leaving room for the Bonjour sentiment. I'll use a little liquid adhesive to glue down the Eiffel Tower and my tweezers to hold that down in place. I'm going to back both girls and the smaller potted yellow flowers with foam adhesive to give some depth and dimension to my scene. This is a scene that really appears to have tons of depth and dimension with the tree background, the Eiffel Tower off in the background, the clouds, the little flower shop, and just a little foam adhesive helps reinforce that feeling on the design. I'm going to stamp the Bonjour sentiment using my Misty and clear embossing ink. I'm using my Misty so I can stamp it twice to get a really crisp image, sprinkle on some white embossing powder, and then heat emboss that sentiment. The white of the sentiment coordinates nicely with all the white framework and white outlines on the die cut images. You can even add a remaining stamped sentiment inside your card if you wanted to, or leave it blank to customize for the recipient. Now it's time to just add the remaining images. We're going to glue our potted red flowers down in place directly to the background. Again, using my tweezers to help hold that flat. My tweezers are one of my most often used tools for holding onto things, positioning things, adding small die cut pieces. They really come in handy. Then that other potted flower was adhered with foam adhesive. And then we will add foam adhesive to the back of the other girl before adding her to the card design. There are a few additional images in the Bonjour Stamp Set, so you could definitely play around with these to create all kinds of fun scenes, as well as use these with your other images also illustrated by the same artist. I love this collection of Around the World from Waffle Flower. It definitely reminds me of our recent trip to Disney World and going to Epcot. I think it would also be fun to probably do a whole set of cards like this from each country, maybe even, and just give it as a gift to someone, a blank set of cards. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this Bonjour card featuring new stamps and dies from the Waffle Flower July 2019 release. The supplies I used to create my card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring Waffle Flower that you might be interested in. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.